Governor Dewhurst, thank you so much for joining us here at KERA. I wanted to start by asking you, your Republican opponents and the Democrat in this race have said that being reelected lieutenant governor for you is sort of like a consolation prize. You really wanted to be U.S. Senator, but you weren't elected in that race. And so I'm wondering, do you at all regret having run for the U.S. Senate?
I'm so happy to be the lieutenant governor of the state of Texas. Shelley, I've told my family, I've told anyone that asked that question, that to be in Washington right now and to be in the minority is not the same thing as being the lieutenant governor of the state of Texas. I thought Ted Cruz ran a very disciplined campaign. Ted and I have been friends for 15 years. He was gracious enough just the other day to say that we've been friends. He liked me during the campaign. We're friends today. So I'm glad he's in Washington, and I'm glad I'm here in Texas.
Are you concerned at all, though, that you might have left that impression that this is a consolation prize, this is second best, being lieutenant governor? How do you convince people that's not true?
Well, so many people at the time said, you know, my only regret about your running for the United States Senate is who's going to be our lieutenant governor. So I think I have shown that. I certainly tried to show that in the fall of 2012, leading up to the session, in which I went out and I said, look, judge me on whether or not we're able to double our water supply, double our highways, double our electricity, solve our border security problem. And I'm really pleased at what we've been able to do. I mean, I worked night and day on our water bill. That's so important because we don't have enough water. We're not going to be able to stay number one. We're not going to be able to grow our economy and double it. And so I worked not only with Chairman Ritter, but Chairman Frazier, and we crafted a bill that takes $2 billion out of the rainy day fund, and we don't spend it. We lend it out short term, just for the construction, and it's paid back with interest. So in 40 years from now, we'll be sitting with $4 to $5 billion, and we'll still be creating, doubling our water supply even then going forward. So I'm pleased that over the next 40 years, we'll double our water supply. I'm pleased with our success on border security. Really important. Since 2007, I've been filling law enforcement's tool bucket, and now we're there. We got there last year.
You mentioned the Proposition 6 and the Rainy Day Fund.
Right.
I know you and your opponent are both trying to appeal to Tea Party voters, and there is a sentiment among many of them that you shouldn't have taken that money, the $2 billion, out of the Rainy Day Fund. It should have come out of general funding instead, and they've criticized all of the candidates who supported Proposition 6, saying that just wasn't the right way to fund it. So how do you convince them that was okay? It was okay to take money out of the Rainy Day Fund as opposed to giving it back to taxpayers?
Shelley, I'm a fiscal conservative. Everyone knows I am. When you compare my record compared with my opponent, I have a much more conservative record than Dan Patrick does in the Texas Senate. This election is not about who is more conservative. We're both plenty conservative. As a matter of fact, Dan Patrick has said repeatedly that he agrees with me 98% of the time. Well, Shelley, I'm not sure my wife agrees with me 98% of the time. But so when I came into the legislature, at the end of the first biennium, you know how much money we had in our rainy day fund? $7 million. But for moving the $2 billion and just readjusting some of the money for our roads, you know how much money we'd have? Almost $11 billion. This way we're going to have a strong $8+ billion, way more than we need for our AAA rating. And we're not spending this money. The $2 billion for water goes into the Water Development Board, is lent short term, paid back with interest. So if we ever needed the funds, we could move them back into the rainy day. But it's there to help jumpstart cities, counties, and our river districts in starting the projects that are needed over the next 40 years to double our water.
You finished second in the primary.
Yeah.
You're the incumbent. You've been in office for a decade, and more than a decade as lieutenant governor. Why do you think you finished second? What happened?
Well, I think we had a low turnout in a lot of ways. We had a low turnout. I don't think our ads connected with people as well as I wanted them to. And Dan Patrick, his ads came up, and I compliment him. He said what people wanted to hear, but people don't know the real Dan Patrick, and some people don't know the real David Dewhurst. And so I'm running a truth campaign to tell people who I am, what I want to do. And on Dan Patrick, all we're doing is we're quoting things he's said, things he's done from newspapers, from TV shows, simply to tell people the truth about Dan Patrick. Because I think when they know Dan Patrick and they know me, they're going to vote for me every day and twice on Sunday.
Well, you mentioned the ads. They've gotten nasty on both sides. I mean, these are some hard-hitting ads. And in your recent TV ads, you characterized Senator Patrick as a tax cheat. You hit him hard for his bankruptcy, but you also went bankrupt in 1982. You repaid your secured creditors, but not all of your unsecured creditors. So I'm wondering, are the ethical obligations you had during your bankruptcy, are they the same as the obligations Senator Patrick had?
Yes and yes. Well, first of all, this has not been a nasty campaign. When I simply put up on TV what has been said in the Dallas Morning News, what's been said on your show, what's been said on other shows, CBS, ABC, then let the voters decide. Now, on the bankruptcy issue, they're apples and oranges. Dan Patrick was running bars and didn't make it, declared a personal bankruptcy. He owed his creditors over $800,000, stiffed them, and then he pocketed his employees' federal income tax withholding payments. Now, in my case, apples and oranges.
And you know that how? That he pocketed his employees' federal income?
Well, because the money was taken out of their checks, right? The money was taken out of their checks, and he didn't turn it into the IRS. The IRS had to go after him and put a lien on him, and he had to work out a payment schedule to pay that back. So it didn't disappear. He didn't give those federal income tax withholding payments to the employees. The employer holds them, turns them into the IRS. He didn't turn them into the IRS, obviously. The Dallas Morning News reported that he had an IRS tax lien on him for some $13,000 or $15,000. So there's no other explanation. In my case, I was one of 3 different shareholders in a company. Our lender put the company into bankruptcy. I was not the majority shareholder, but I felt obliged. We had lots of assets, almost as many as our liabilities, but I wanted to make sure that our bank debt was paid back, so I paid it back personally, $830 some odd thousand, and I paid back other secured debts. And so I tried to get everybody paid back.
All of this happened 30 years ago.
Right.
Does it matter anymore for either one of you?
Well, it matters only if this is a pattern, Shelley. It matters only if this is simply an example of character. Because if we're both real conservative and we both agree with each other on policy 98% of the time, then it's a question of who has the character and the ability and the vision to lead this state forward over the next 4 years. And I submit on the facts, it's me.
Since we're talking about the ads, he has a pretty tough one up about you.
Sure.
And immigration, it's a big issue in your campaign. I know
Right.
the Republican voters care about it. And he said you didn't, that you have supported in-state tuition for illegal immigrants who've been here. You've said you haven't. I know you weren't in the legislature, in the Senate, when that vote came up in 2001.
Right.
But I'm wondering, what have you done? You say you want to repeal in-state tuition, but what have you done in the past decade or so that you've been in the Senate to work on that? Because if you wanted to repeal it, why haven't you done it by now?
Because there weren't the votes to do it. There were not the votes to do it. In 2005, we had a bill that Dan Patrick says I passed that increased benefits for illegal aliens. The man either cannot tell the truth or he cannot read a bill. and both are bad outcomes. What the bill does, it reduces in-state tuition for foreign students who are here in Texas. It moves that category to pre-2001. Now, it does increase in-state tuition for U.S. citizens, children of U.S. citizens who are still living in Texas and their parents for business or whatever get moved to another state. So they can stay here and finish out college. But Dan Patrick is not telling the truth.
If he doesn't tell the truth, if he can't get along with people, which is what you've maintained, why did you appoint him to be chair of a very important committee, public education? If he's not trustworthy, why did you put him there? Because
hope springs eternal. He came in to see me during the fall of 2012, 6, 7, 8 times. And said we were longtime friends, and he wanted to work on this, and education was a passion. He'd work hand in glove with me, and we would together improve public education. Didn't happen that way. The first chance he had when I gave him a bill, Senate Bill 1406, which was to end C-scope, end it by putting it under, our textbooks are under the review and control of the State Board of Education, but our curriculum is not. So this bill was to put C-scope as curriculum under the review and correction, and the correction for bias and factual errors of the conservative majority of the State Board of Education. But I had to push him to pass the bill. And then the next thing I know, he's on the back mic over in the House of Representatives, working with Democrats, trying to kill the bill. Now, then he goes over and he negotiates, never talks to me, to dissolve the not-for-profit over C-scope. So instead of just having to one time only have our State Board of Education review, correct for bias and for factual errors, like our founding fathers were terrorists. You can't be a terrorist when you pay for the tea that you dump in Boston Harbor. So to make those corrections, it goes viral. And it goes out to all the schools. And now we're trying to get the horses back in the barn. I think Dan Patrick is plenty bright. And I've known him for a long time. And off and on, we've been friends and close. But he's almost been a disc jockey too long. He doesn't get more than a sentence or two, a soundbite or two into a policy subject, with a couple of exceptions. I'll give him that, with a couple of exceptions. But he's always trying to get publicity, whether it's one of his first committee hearings, he shows up with $1 million in cash and we've got the DPS running around, alarms going on, or whether he's showboating and he's going over and without talking to me, trying to dissolve, as I just mentioned, the not-for-profit over C-scope. It takes judgment. It takes ability to think through the next step. If you're constantly running for a soundbite, if you're constantly running for publicity, if this is about you, then you got problems. From day one, my motivation for serving as your lieutenant governor has been to move Texas forward, has been to do what's in the best interest of all Texans. That's my motivation. And I've not looked at any applause on myself. I don't get any. Somebody once said, if you want to get to be appreciated in politics, buy a dog. But what I've tried to do is have the senators do a good job, work with them. If the senators do well, fine, I'm going to do well. And that's what I've wanted, to move the state of Texas forward.
I want to talk a little further about education, because I heard you say in the Houston debate that you wanted a full day pre-K for all Texas children. I don't think I've heard you say that before. And then you said you wanted to make sure we had the money for it. Do you think the money's there?
What I said, Shelley, is that I think we all know that the most development you can give children early is better for them. And we have some school systems that pay for full day pre-K. Right? And a number of school districts don't. And so what I wanted to do was to look at this and see where we need to invest dollars, how much that's going to cost, whether or not we can afford it, whether or not we can afford not to provide it, or whether or not we can afford to provide it. And so I want to take a informed decision and make that recommendation.
But it would be your hope that you could provide full-day pre-K.
It would be my hope that we could provide full-day pre-K as long as the data shows that it's really helping. It's not babysitting. I think there are some people out there, a lot of authorities think that a half day is fine, full day in some cases is babysitting. Now, but I think it's really up to who we have staffing. And so if we have the funds and it makes a material improvement, then I'm going to consider it. Right now, I have a question mark.
Do you think the state has adequately funded public education? And I say that knowing that any day, Judge Dietz is going to call the attorneys back and decide whether we have an unconstitutional system.
Yeah.
Do you think we've adequately funded our education system? Should we have done something differently?
Shelley, I think that certainly over the last couple of years, we have made record investments in public education. Just this past year in 2013, Dan Patrick and the Democrats came together and some of the Republicans and came up with a number of $3.4 billion of new money that Dan wanted to put into public education. I thought, quite frankly, it was a little more than we can afford, but I went along with it. Then Dan wanted additional funding, about $80 or $90 million for a couple of his pet projects in the education area, and I said, we don't have the money for that. But yes, I think we funded our public education. There's a big disagreement concerning 2011. People keep bringing me back there. In other words, in 2011, the state had not financially grown out of the recession. And so our school finance formula was too rich. It was we provided more funds for public education in the schools, in the foundation school program. Money for the schools where, ladies and gentlemen, your children go. But we cut some programs.
The per pupil spending did not go up.
The per pupil funding may not have gone up, but we increased funding for over the previous biennium per student. The ADA went up, but not the WADA, the weighted average. And that was because that year we had a $20 billion, $25 billion shortfall. So I had to cut other programs so we had the money so that we could put the additional dollars into public education and fill up the hole that the stimulus funds had created when we took them. And we took those funds in 2009 only because to not take them, they would have gone to other states and Texans had paid 8% of every dollar.
I wanted to ask a little bit about the Hispanic vote.
Sure.
As we know, the number of Hispanic voters in the state is growing exponentially. Right. You and your opponent have both talked tough about cracking down on the border, curbing in-state tuition, no amnesty. Tell me why Hispanics should vote, should even consider voting for David Dewhurst.
Well, when I spoke 2 weeks ago, when I spoke to the Houston Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the largest chamber of commerce in the whole country, some 1,500, 1,600 people were there that day. I talked through a lot of this, and I said that we've got a problem, not just illegal immigration. I said, I ran an ad years ago that said, illegal immigration is a serious problem. But I'm not mad at people who want to come to America. America's a great country. We're all from someplace else. I'm mad at the federal government for not securing our borders. Not securing our borders when it's one of the few constitutional duties that our federal government has. And they failed miserably. That's why, Shelley, I have worked since 2007 to fill that toolbox, appropriating $800 million. That's a lot of money. Senator Patrick said last Friday it was a drop in the bucket. That's a lot of money, $800 million. And now we've got the tools, aircraft, helicopters, gunboats, people on the ground, so that we can do what I started off to do 7 years ago. And that is with state police and our sheriff's departments, secure the border, stop illegal immigration, which hurts our state, cost money, stop drugs from coming in, which are killing Texans, stop these transnational gangs from coming into all of our cities and wreak havoc, organized crime, stop human trafficking, Shelley, which is awful, just an awful, terrible thing, using children like that. So stop that. It's not going to affect trade, not going to even touch the checkpoints, none of that. All right, but stop that. Then we're going to be in a position to be able to address who's here. As you know,
So at that point, would you support a guest worker program?
At that point, that's on the table, absolutely. But I think politically we can get there. We won't have the support. But we are so close. We've already run one-month surge operation, showed that it worked. And I really don't want to go into details today, but we are very close to running the second and last test. And when that proves to work, then we'll be running it 24/7. We'll be shutting down the border, the whole Texas border with Mexico, 24/7, year after year, and sending Barack Obama the bill each month.
Everybody has a skill set, things they're better at than others. What do you think the greatest talent and skill is that you bring to the Lieutenant Governor's office? What do you do best?
Well, Shelley, it's clearly not being the most glib speaker. It's clearly not being the fastest speaker. You know, when my dad was killed by a drunk driver, Mom says that I was so traumatized that I stuttered I couldn't talk. So I speak slower. But I like to problem solve. I like to solve problems. I'm a businessman. I mean, I like to move the state of Texas forward. It gives me I love doing things for people. I love doing things for Texans to help them. I know my being involved, didn't do it all alone, but my being involved in cutting taxes 54 times for almost $16 billion has helped us create the best business climate in Texas of any other state. It's created more jobs, all right? Now, the state didn't create jobs, but our business climate made it almost irresistible for Texas companies to stay, invest, and other companies to come in and invest. I mean, over the last 10 years, Texans have created almost 2 million new jobs. It's unbelievable. Each year of the last 3 years, Texans have created more new jobs than the rest of the country combined. Just think about that. 8% of the population's created more new jobs than 92%. Unbelievable. Now doing that, solving problems, taking the sonogram bill that my opponent is so proud of. When it didn't work, the House was mad at him. They wouldn't pass his bill. I worked with Kylene Wright, Elizabeth Graham for 2 weeks. We redrafted the bill, made it a little tougher, worked with Dan, got it passed. That was good.
He takes credit for that.
Of course he does.
Should he?
Of course. Well, his name was on the bill, but he also thanks me for my help. And he should be thanking Kylene Wright and Elizabeth Graham and other pro-life leaders that really spent a lot of time trying to help. But I like getting things done. I like getting government out of people's way. I'm a liberty guy. I mean, I'm all about opportunity, but you can't have opportunity without freedom and liberty. And so over the years, I've tried to get government out of Texans' lives as much as possible so they have more freedom to be able to live their lives.
Well, the flip side of that question is, of course, everybody is good at everybody has some
Sure.
things they're better at than others, and then there's some things that are challenges and struggles. What do you struggle with as Lieutenant Governor? What skill set would you improve if you could?
I think my communication. I haven't done a very good job of getting out and telling the people of Texas what we're doing, why we're doing it, and opening up and telling people who David is. I've certainly seen that in spades over the last year and a half, where my lovely wife Tricia keeps saying, just go be David. I was asked for both Dan Patrick and I were asked to interview with the Clear Lake Tea Party 4 weeks ago. And I went over and I walked in, and what they told me later, all 11 directors had already made up their mind. They didn't like me, they didn't know me. they weren't going to pick me for an endorsement. 2 hours later, 2.5 hours later, we're all friends. They'd gotten to know the David they didn't know, and they've been very, very supportive, and that's happened over and over and over again. So I haven't done a very good job in telling people why we're doing things in the state, reminding them the keys. See, a lot of people out there.
Well, Governor, why did it take you 10 years?
Well, I thought I was doing a much better job. But so many people think that state government just happens. They don't realize that, and you know this, that our bills, that the legislature is designed to kill bills, not pass bills. They don't realize that unless you've got a strong lieutenant governor who has ability, who has integrity and a vision, you're not going to get those bills passed. And if you have a lieutenant governor that's controversial, that the senators can't trust his word, then nothing's going to happen. Then the whole state of Texas slows down to a grind, and that hurts.
And you think Dan Patrick has that
persona? I simply said that if you don't have a lieutenant governor that has integrity and that the members can believe that person, they're either going to change some of the rules. They're not going to. He's not going to be able to be effective. And you need a strong lieutenant governor, just like you need a strong speaker. You need a strong governor.
Is there a single accomplishment in the past decade that you would look to and say, "This is what people need to know about me. This is what I've done that I consider perhaps my most important signature piece of legislation or accomplishment"?
You know, people always ask that single piece. Do you mind if I give you two?
Oh, you can have two.
Thanks.
You can have two.
Thank you. You know, when I came into the legislature in 2003, I've been in almost 11 years. Patrick's been in 7 years, close to the same time. But when I came in, we had a $10 billion shortfall. And I came in, and there was a lot of concern in the Senate. And I planned and planned and planned and worked and worked and worked and knew what I wanted to do to balance the budget. And we balanced it without raising taxes. And then we proceeded. I think that sent a big signal to business that we were serious about balancing the budget, maintaining, actually we increased somewhat our spending on public education. We held our higher education spending flat, but we didn't cut those two priorities. But that sent a signal. And then our economy rebounded until the recession in late 2008 and 2009. And then we come back strong. But what I've tried to do over and over again is, anytime I could, to cut taxes, 54 times. I've tried to eliminate waste by consolidating 57 state agencies. Now, I've got the most fiscally conservative record of any lieutenant governor in the country. And I've got a passion for making, as a businessman, I'm the only traditional business person elected statewide. I know what businesses want, and so I try and create the best business climate possible. So I'm proud of that because it's created jobs. Almost 2 million new jobs I didn't create, but the business climate made it possible for businesses to hire people. Almost 2 million new jobs. The other thing is protecting kids and women's health. I was presiding over an execution when Governor Perry was gone one time. I've done this some 30, 40 times. And there was a particularly terrible fact pattern about a sexual predator who would end up killing this little 5-year-old girl. It was so horrific that I spent almost the next year of my life, whenever I had time, talking to sexual abuse victims, parents, police officers, DAs around the state. And I passed the toughest Jessica's Law in the country. And I think that's helped. What I want to do in the future, I've tried to champion improving our public education system, and it's going to take much more effort. We're still not where I want to see us. I'm a product, Shelley, of public education in Houston. I got a good public education, thank God. I had a chance to go to college because the University of Arizona thought I was a great basketball player. I wasn't, but anyway. So I want everybody to have a great public education. And we've got some great teachers and we've got some great principals, but we don't have enough of both of those. And so I want to make sure that where we don't have great teachers and great principals, that we're using as much as possible our technology, distance learning. We're bringing great teachers in the classroom. And where there's resistance, where there are failing schools, and there are too many failing schools. In 2012, we had 521 schools, 315,000 students. If the school district's not going to turn that school around, then I'm a big supporter of giving parents more choice, because if parents have more choice, then children have a better chance. Secondly, I want to finish the work that I've started. We've made a lot of progress on water. I'm really proud of the water bill. It is second to none in the country. It's really bold. And I want to make sure we stay on schedule. I want to see things starting, ground to be broken, and projects to be started in this next January, so that we can provide the water supplies we don't have. I want to double our highway miles. I want to double our electricity for our growing population. I want to make sure that if we get resistance on public education, if we have to take on the teacher unions who have a tendency to say no, we got some great teacher unions, and we have some that Gail Fallon runs a great organization down in Houston. I can't say enough about her and how objective she is, but some of our unions just say no. And if we have to take them on, then I'll take them on. I want to make sure that we finish border security. We should have it fully implemented by the fall, but if it takes longer, then I want to make sure it's implemented, it's done right, and we take illegal immigration off the table. It's out of our conversation because now we've secured the border. And then I want to make sure that the federal government or the states, New Mexico next door, and Arizona and California, do the same thing so we can secure our whole southern border. I want to make sure that we're holding people responsible for their actions. This past year, I passed out 2 bills, one for Texans receiving unemployment benefits, one for Texans receiving welfare.
Drug testing.
That's right, drug testing. I want to see drug testing on welfare recipients. Now, the House played with that bill. The House passed the drug testing for unemployment, but really made a mockery of the bill on welfare, saying we weren't being thoughtful of children. The funds can go to the children, but the parents, if they're going to get involved in drugs, are going to end up not helping children. I want everyone to take personal responsibility. If the state of Texas, if people are going to pay taxes and provide a safety net for someone that's on unemployment, then they don't want you staying home, sitting on the couch, playing video games and doing drugs. The same thing, a safety net on welfare. Get back on your feet and go out and take advantage of all the opportunities here in Texas.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.